Hello, everybody, and welcome to issue 6, I believe, of the Retail's podcast. We're cracking through the episodes now. How are you doing, Toby?
I'm doing very well. It's we've just had Easter over here, and the weather's good. It looks like spring's really starting to happen.
Oh, good. Lucky for you. I went fishing last Sunday and caught a tan down one side of my face, then woke the following morning to see snow swirling around my garden. So we have the
wonderful British weather.
It's the British weather, yes, exactly. Okay, so today we're going to be looking at the sustainable store. We have a fabulous guest, Garry Wells, who was at Lush for 17 years, involved in buying and project managing their store fit outs, which to me are one of the benchmarks for sustainable retail on so many aspects. I saw Garry present 3 years ago at the Retail Expo in London, and I wrote 8 pages of notes in my notebook. Still spout some of those statistics in my meetings today. It was a real eye-opener to understand the real approach, and I'm particularly looking forward to him chatting with you, Toby, because in your days at Nike, you were probably specifying a lot of retail ideas around sustainability, and Garry implemented them. So I think it'd be interesting to see your corresponding views in that area.
I think it was really interesting. We did a lot of work with Move to Zero. So Nike, the sustainable program is called Move to Zero. And we did a lot of work with things like shoe recycling. And also we had a Move to Zero lab that started in Japan and you'll see rolled out over the next couple of years in the US and the UK. The interesting thing, I think, and you start to see actually in House of Innovation in Paris, there was a real big shift. I mean, a lot of the messaging there. But I think what was really eye-opening was over the last, I think probably end of 2019, we'd done incredible work, well, Nike had done incredible work with the product itself. And there was a kind of moment where everyone was like, okay, hold on, we've got these incredible shoes, we've got this incredible product, we're using these incredible materials, but the stores themselves that people are walking into haven't really been thought out in the right way, been thought out through a sustainable way. And so there's a real focus on not only the materials we use a lot of what's called grind, which is where you take the shoes and grind them up and use those. So a lot of what I'd be interested to find out is we really had to go further than just saying we know that this store is sustainable. It had to be a message to consumers. So for example, the podiums that you put shoes on, they were really visibly grind. So it wasn't just that they were grind inside covered with varnish, they were really obviously grind. And that created huge problems for the operations teams because they don't wear as well as concrete or wood or so on. So they really do, you can pick at them and they pull apart. So we had operational challenges. And then I think the other big thing that was a real a kind of thought process or a thought kind of journey was that even if you have the store itself physically, that the HVAC's working, the power's working, everything else is kind of using green energy, we have the materials right. Every month we put in new materials, new banners, new images, new screens. Hold on a minute, how sustainable is that itself? So suddenly that had to rethink a lot of the process sides. The operation of the process people have been really key to making it happen.
I agree. I think there's a ripple effect that you get with a principle and an idea where you see it on the superficial level, but when you get to implement, you sort of get to see the effect it has on so many parts of the business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Well, let's admit Garry into the call and see if we can find out a little bit more about his experiences. Just waiting for Garry to connect. He's nearly there.
We need some filler music or the house band to play some music as we do these introductions.
Yes. Can you hear us, Garry?
Doesn't appear to be part of the call at the moment.
Trying to sign in. Can you hear us, Garry?
There he is.
There he is. Hi, Garry. How are you? Just trying to connect your audio.
Yeah, done now.
There we go. Fantastic. Thank you for joining us today, Garry. I hope you're well.
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you very much, Ian. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Very well. I was just saying to Toby, I was sort of very interested in seeing how you two chat, because you've been very heavily involved in sort of implementing and sourcing sustainable store environments. And Toby, as a former senior director at Nike for customer experience, has been heavily involved in specifying a whole range of different elements as well. So it will be interesting to see, because I think the two of you almost start and end the process as that goes on. So what I wanted to do to start with was really asking you a little bit about some of the materials that get used in stores. Now, recycled materials are an obvious thing, but I'm sure that there are other elements around material specifications that will be important when considering a store that ticks this sort of sustainability box.
Absolutely. You've got the obvious ones as with regards to kind of timber.
Yeah.
And we all know kind of you can get sustainable timber, how it's managed, how it's forested, and how it's managed. And also you kind of need to look at the way I used to do things is take a shop from the core, so kind of the bricks and mortar, and then we used to work our way inside. So it would be kind of looking at the timber used for the framework, plasterboard. We would look at any wall coverings that are set aside as different. We would look at all the different paint options that we could access. There are, like you say, the recycled content materials, as in kind of plastic table, kind of tabletop surfaces. There's the floor tiles, lighting, all of those bits and pieces that come together to create an amazing looking store. Now, with those in mind, it all sounds very, very lovely, but these aren't on the shelf, off the shelf materials that you can just kind of pop down to the shop and have a look at. So it was really, really, it was a huge, huge project, an exercise we did on a global scale to look around the world and find out who we would, back when I was working, obviously on this a little bit more, wanted to kind of make a difference with us. And it's all about finding, from my point of view, it's all about finding a company or a manufacturer that wants to enter into a journey with you, which is all about design, customer experience, but ultimately kind of giving back and giving back to the environment, to the planet, and also working with materials that offer that take back system. So what I mean by that is working with a manufacturer, coming up with a concept, working with a manufacturer through the process, assembly, quality control, and then you start looking at the kind of the end result, the packaging, the distribution, the logistics, because there's no point in just creating an environmentally friendly material. You need to get it to where you need to kind of have it in a sustainable way. You need to have a look at what it's packaged in to make sure that everything that you're using, from a wooden pallet to cardboard strapping to whatever, can be recycled again. So looking at all of those really, and then really kind of having a look at the installation and kind of making sure it's fit for purpose, and that the customer ultimately has the enjoyment and the kind of understanding about the efforts that the business has gone to with regards to that design.
Yeah.
So when I'm kind of looking at one of the biggest things that we found, or were found in the past, was glazing. So glazing was a huge part. So shop fronts, kind of, everyone started to move into these kind of glazed partitions, and the obscure glass and the decorative glass finishes and what have you. And that was being used more and more so. And then we found a company that we kind of looked into and worked with that would offer us a percentage of recycled content. So with that kind of theory, with that process, it was kind of taken back. Now from the company that I used to work for had a manufacturing unit as well. They used to supply into themselves. So any glass that came in via a raw material, so whether that would be an oil, whether that be any other liquid, We then built a relationship up with that supplier to take all of our glass away, recycle that into a kind of sheet material. So whether it would be a decorative piece, whether it be a plain glass, toughened glass, or whatever it may be, and kind of work with us on delivering that look and that feel. And then at the end of that, so maybe, I don't know, another 3, 4, 5 years until we're ready to revamp that store or give it a bit of an uplift or a refit, they will take back, recycle, and reproduce another piece.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of closing that loop, really, making that a full cycle. And that was kind of how I wanted to work and how I kind of set out my kind of team and kind of the direction and the objectives of what we wanted to follow. It's all very good having a few green labels dotted around to say we do this, we do that, and it's fantastic, and everyone gives you a pat on the back and a big high five, but it's actually looking at the whole process. You know, we're talking about right from, like I say, the manufacture through to delivery, and then what happens to it after then.
Yeah. Where did that process start? I think I was saying to Ian before he came on, I think with Nike, one of the things, it was a real eye-opening kind of light bulb moment where Nike had done a great deal of work with the product. So the product themselves was, we were recycling shoes, we were creating our own materials that we could recycle the shoes, 100% recycled materials into the apparel. And it was like one of those moments where somebody looked at this, we had a Move to Zero lab, which was called, and we had this amazing product, and suddenly looked at it and like, hold on, all of this has just been produced last week that we used, I think it's a company called Satisfied, created this incredible environment. And we're like, well, hold on, the environment itself isn't recyclable and the product next to it isn't recyclable. So the whole thing was just it was the last part of the process, really. And I think that the teams, the ops teams that we were working with really were very much a partner in the process, but their approach was like, we can do whatever you want. You know, we can move to a completely recyclable process that is a cyclical design process, but it will cost you. And the cost of that is, I'm going to make up a number, is 10 times what it was with the old way of doing that. And so your square footage and your productivity per square footage is going to be damaged in that way. Is that something you want to do? And so we had to go right to the highest level to say, the impact of doing this is going to be huge, and we still want to do this, and these are the reasons we want to do that, but it had to be thought out in that way. From your point of view, where did the process start? Was it from your kind of ops side saying this is the right thing to do and then pushing that back into the business, or was it a desire from the business for you to then rethink about it?
It was always a desire for the business. So I'm not sure whether Ian mentioned, but I used to work for Lush.
Yeah.
So Lush has the environment at its core. You know, it's their values, it's the products, and the kind of business is built around that as well. So for us, or when I was working for them, it was very, very straightforward in kind of getting the decision, because we knew that there were cost implications. We knew that there was going to be kind of a first off. You know, but we were quite happy to be that person, and we were quite happy to be that business that started things moving. Yeah. And when it came to conversations about cost and price, it was, you have the financial side, but then you have the responsibility side. You know, and the responsibility side far outweighs the financial side of it. Obviously, in a business, it needs to make sense, but that's then how I went in and, you know, was negotiating with suppliers and talking about that journey that I've spoken about. So rather than just being a one-hit wonder, this is what we're talking about. So if you want to come on a journey with us and really kind of work and kind of, you know, build a portfolio that's worthwhile, then we can offer not necessarily kind of UK business, but then we start talking on a global structure as well, which to local kind of businesses or kind of medium-sized businesses is an absolute kind of godsend.
Yeah.
You know, when we did get to when we did speak to, you know, the nationwide companies and that, a lot of them laughed. A lot of them just, you know, it's not even worth our time and what have you. And that's absolutely fine. That's their stance and that's their kind of look on, you know, outlook on it. But then I think it's really valuable, and the thing that kind of drove me and it gave me my motivation is finding those companies that really want to do better. and want to kind of deliver with you, and then have a fantastic, but exceptionally exceptional shop on the high street that is so popular, and they can kind of put their hand up and say they have part of that. Yeah, they were involved in that group.
I think one of the things that I've been trying to sort of push is like, this isn't a new thing. It's not a new shiny thing. This is just the way that it should have been years ago. You know, this is the way it should be. It's the same as this. I don't know. I often kind of paralleled it to diversity conversations, because it's like, these aren't kind of like, oh, this would be good and fun and do it this year and we'll have these numbers and we'll measure these numbers. Like, that doesn't get you anywhere. Actually, this is how you should run businesses, whether it's a B Corp or whether it's thinking about the right way of doing that. When you're thinking about designing a store, of course, it shouldn't have huge impacts on the environment. Like, if you're looking the other way, it's like, so you're okay with this. This is the damage you're going to create to the environment. And when you're doing it at scale, like at Nike, there's a lot of scale. So it's kind of like, this is the damage you're going to make. Is that, you know, everything costs, everything costs. And so someone's going to have to pay for it at some point. So I think it was the push to have it, make it a long-term cyclical, this is just the way we're going to do business from now on, is I 100% agree with that. I think that's the right way to kind of implement that. One thing I think I found interesting, and I don't know, I'd love to hear if it was different for you, was not only making sure that the logistics and the operations of the boxes that we were building that were sustainable, we needed to, and because Nike is such a brand-led company, we needed to make that really clear to the consumer. So one of the things that we had to do was to sometimes counterintuitively demonstrate that the materials were sustainable, because quite often the things like HVAC or like air conditioning, like no one knows that. You don't see that. You don't see that that's a different system. You don't see that we're using green energy, those kind of things. So how do you kind of marry the consumer experience side of it, and sort of so you can demonstrate and prove that in some ways?
Personally, I would say through customer interaction, definitely. So when we were talking about the experience before, it's about, in my mind, it's about walking into a store and kind of being welcomed and immersed into that experience. So whether that would be kind of cosmetics, whether that's clothing, whether that's grocery, anything like that, food or beverage, whatever it may be, it's an interest. So that design has to be striking. It has to kind of prompt you to ask questions about it. There are very many stores with kind of like cookie cutters, kind of, you know, units that blend in, they all look the same, whatever. When you walk into a place and it's like, the first thing you notice is not the actual product, it's the kind of like surrounds, if you like, or the environment. You know, I'm talking like coffee shops or kind of grocery stores and that. It kind of strikes you, and it prompts you and it encourages you to ask the questions. Now, when I was working for Lush, we had the customer interaction was huge. I'm not sure if you've been in one of their stores, but it's kind of the 5-star customer service, really. You know, you want to kind of strike up that relationship.
I visit a lot of stores, Gary, and I tell everyone that the store staff in Lush, and I've been in Asia, America, and in Europe, are hands down the best staff I've ever seen, and consistently in every store I've been to. And I agree, makes a massive difference to the success of the store and the engagement with shoppers.
Yeah.
So
absolutely. And I think from the point of kind of walking into an environment that's not too overpowering, and it's all about the product. You know, the customer interaction, the 5-star customer service and the experience was all about the product. And when you start engaging with someone about the product that you're trying to sell, then the other questions and the other kind of commentary will follow. You know, it's about, oh, you know, if you are interested in those areas, we need to tell you about X, Y, and Z. Or if it's something really kind of, I mean, I remember had a conversation once about trying to tell a story about floor tile. All right, so it's not the most enthralling subject, but I put so much work into this and working with the company that I just didn't know how to tell that story. So what I did on this entrance piece was have all of the details, just kind of bullet points, kind of cut out in the tile. So as you walk in the store, it's there, and you're like, oh, what's that? And then you just start reading it, literally like taglines, kind of bullet points. Or then you'd go into like the wall structure. I mean, nobody wants to know about the wall structure, but somebody's done so much hard work. We had a cutout in the wall that you can look through, and then we detail what everything is. So it's more of an educational thing as well.
Yeah.
And then what we did find, is going into stores like Lush, you have the dads, the husbands, the boyfriends that some are like, oh my God, it smells too much. I'm standing at the front of the store, and they clog up the doorway and clog up kind of all the area, especially when you're busy. Best people to engage with. You want to start talking about timber, you want to start talking about floor tiles, you want to start talking about kind of like sustainability and like materials, building, kind of, kind of construction processes. Great. They want to stand there and you can talk to them forever. And then all of a sudden they get engaged, and then you'll find them gradually moving further and further into the store. So whilst everyone's looking at the product, you can kind of capture another audience, if you like. So you're always keeping busy. The story gets further and further, and it just kind of unfolds from there. But I do think that it is ingrained in you. It's core values, and I think Lush, their customer service is excellent because there's that belief in what they're doing and what they're selling, and all the hard work that goes into buying and sourcing and purchasing all the raw materials for the products. And also, with Lush, it's not just necessarily the environment, it's all about animal welfare as well, and it's all about kind of fair share for everyone. So regardless whether it's, the big cat taking all the cream, it's like, actually, we want to kind of spread it out and make sure that everybody, has a fair share and a fair kind of slice of the pie, if you like. So yeah, it's ingrained, it's part of the values, it's part of your day-to-day kind of business and kind of your passion there inside. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think it's something that's very important right now is that really making sure that the brand purpose that you have as a business is clear, it's understood by everyone who works there, and then that also is communicated all the way through to the consumer. And so if you believe that's your brand purpose, and you have you spent time building your business around that purpose, to then fuck it up at the last space with a store that doesn't reflect that purpose, it just it undermines everything that you've done in the past. So I think that's fair. One of the things that I think we also found interesting, or I was fascinated by, was one of the other, thinking about kind of 11th hour thing, was also that the kind of marketing collateral. And I don't know kind of how involved kind of you were in those kind of things, but quite often that there was traditionally, and especially Nike does a lot of activations in the stores. There's a lot of work that goes into building those out. There's a lot of different teams to create that. But at the same time, there's a lot of that material that just is used for a campaign and then thrown away. So there's a real focus on what can we do with that. And there's a company here in Portland that we did a couple of projects with, which I thought was really interesting, where they were taking these big, they weren't canvas, but like kind of like the plastic canvas materials that things were printed on. And after a campaign, take those and sew them into tote bags, so that somebody could come in and when you put your shoes in the tote bag, trying to get rid of plastic and still trying to get, moving to card bags. But actually you get these tote bags, which you could see that here's a LeBron's face or whatever, or a little tiny bit of LeBron's face, because their material had been turned into something else. And I think
that's an industry that's growing quite well, isn't it? I mean, North Face have just launched a range of bags made out of their tents. But I mean, for years now, Freitag have been using some of the big outdoor banners and tarpaulins and seatbelts, and they create messenger bags. And they have this stunning store in Zurich made out of stacked containers. And you can see brands like that and Lush. You can see that it's not a marketing gimmick. It's the ethos of the company and why it exists. And you do get to see that difference where companies really have the real purpose rather than viewing it as a quick marketing gain as well.
Yeah. So I think that marketing activation side is one that's also having to think about sustainable, because they've never had to do that in the past. The team who create the materials and they create that, they just throw them and say, can you someone else print that? And then having to think, it's created so many interesting conversations throughout the whole organization, where everyone is now thinking about what are they outputting and is it necessary?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with those, so with the campaigning groups and what have you that I've kind of worked with in the past or kind of spoken to, it's with a mindset that to actually, if it's all about environmental, from an environmental point of view, then everything that should be used in there is either made from a recycled material and can be repurposed or kind of like recycled, reused, upcycled, whatever in another part of the business. So that is kind of how I would be talking about that, or kind of, you know, conversing with other teams. It's like absolutely great about the campaign that wants to be run, but we need to start thinking about, like you just said, you know, it's not this is my job and that's it, starts and stops here. It's about having that wider vision about the business and and what needs to be, you know, what are the fundamentals, what are your kind of objectives, and the idea of running a successful campaign from start to finish would be, you know, like I've just mentioned before, is making sure that you're creating a sustainable product, but you can also deal with it easily afterwards. So whether that is remaking materials, remaking something else, you know, it could take in all many shapes. But as long as that's in the mindset, I think, if it's not, and that's not one of the business drivers, then it's a really, really hard battle to kind of win, because otherwise you're just fighting a losing battle. You've got some kind of really involved and want to take it further and do their bit, and then you've got this team that's just ruining everything because it's just single use, one-stop shop. Great, I've met my deadlines and I've done this, that, and the other without a care and without any value.
Yeah,
I think that's a great way of breaking down the silos between different departments, because I see on so many levels in retail, you know, for example, the insights team doesn't talk to the design team, so you can't translate the knowledge into a new idea. And I'm constantly hearing this, or even just marketing departments proudly announcing, like Domino's did a few months ago, our online team are working with our main marketing team, like it's a new thing that's worth shouting about. I'd imagine, you know, to properly deliver sustainable solutions like that, every single department has to work. So, and if it's driven from the top, as in you guys have to do this, in many ways, these sort of projects are a great way of forcing the different departments to break down those walls and work together as well. And it makes a big difference, I think.
Absolutely.
Cool.
What's one material that's that you've kind of struggled with, or one thing? Because I think furniture fittings, at Nike, there's a lot of interesting things using grind and so on. You mentioned kind of floor tiles and timber, I think is kind of quite far in there. What's one material that kind of is still lagging behind?
I'd say one material that I did struggle with was kind of metals. So any mined material or any metals, you know, everyone's moving towards this kind of industrial kind of look.
Yeah.
You know, the black metal, the green metal, whatever it may be, the trims, the kind of, you know, decorative pieces. You've got some companies, or there are some companies present that will work with you and add a percentage of recycled content into a virgin mix.
Yeah.
But it's all about, what's really, really difficult is to find somebody who is a responsible kind of source, if you like. Because you've got no way of saying really, it's all based on trust, a lot of it, especially with metal when it's mass produced. You have to trust them that they're doing what they say they do. You know, they're not just kind of, you know, pulling the wool over your eyes. Oh yeah, it's got, like, you know, recycled content in there. What's the percentage? Oh, it's around about 80, 90%. You're like, well, that's impossible. So it's just that conversation and really kind of getting to grips with it, but understanding the components and the construction of that material. Because if you don't understand that, you can't make suggestions to moving forward and how you're going to kind of interpret that, or how he can make a difference, and start looking at alternatives. But one of them that, like I say, it's a trend, isn't it? It's a fashion item at the moment, is metal.
Yeah.
Now, if you can find a metal to use, a decorative metal that, again, like we were just saying about the campaigns, that you'll be able to use in another part of the business, or it can be, or you're prepared to kind of melt it down again and reform it, or, you know, get some, you know, work with a local metal worker and create something else from it, then you're carrying on that repurposing side.
Yeah. It's interesting You mentioned the trend on that. Is that one that was interesting was that we shifted. One of the reasons I shifted to using a kind of completely more modular approach to kind of pipes and shelving units was that it actually lasted a lot longer. And so one of the previous ones was that the materials that kind of we used before were they were more like boutique style approaches to things, which were probably like more sustainable materials, but they had to be churned through a lot quicker. And so by using a lot of like, it looks like scaffolding, you know, like not sure how well that translates in the States, but it's kind of having the kind of like big scaffolding poles or like IKEA units you can modular change. I mean, actually, whether you're looking at a Pegasus or a Jordan or something else, you can use those far easily. So actually we found that probably the materials weren't as sustainable as the older ones, but they were more modular, which is interesting.
Well, the Paris House of Innovation used an extruded aluminium system.
Yeah.
In fact, I know the company Unibox that worked with me to develop that. I used to work for them, and they do some fabulous stuff. And it reconstitutes. I mean, Garry will correct me if I'm wrong here. I'm going on hearsay and a salesman's spiel here, but you know, aluminium is highly recycled. You know, and I was told that, you know, often a bit of aluminium may have bits that have been recycled up to 7 times in it, and it's a material that can be then reconstituted. Is that right, Garry? So it easily reworked afterwards. Yeah. So yeah, I saw that as and I used to go out and sell that system for them to retailers. You know, so it was great to see that it turned up in the House of Innovation store, because it was always sold on flexibility, lightweight, but also it ticked an awful lot of those sustainable boxes. But I think how you design and manufacture it, as you were saying, becomes very important as well. Just the raw material alone isn't enough.
But there's also the story to be told there, Toby, with regards to you know, if you're using the modular kind of units, the scaffold poles, you know, the kind of timber and what have you, that's a story in itself, providing they've come from somewhere. So where was their birth? You know, what's it been used for? Has it been, you know, did it have another life before it came to you guys? And then now you're using it. It's a kind of a look or a concept that you want to carry on with. So how long is that going to be? That could be like a 10-year program, what have you. Now, all of a sudden, it's come from, for example, from a building site where you've built X amount of homes. It's now coming to the Nike store where it's going to be another 10 years serving a purpose. Yeah. And then when you're finished with it, or your concept changes or what have you, it's about how you guys then deal with that. And as long as you've got that in your kind of back pocket, in your mind, that, yes, fantastic, cheap, cheerful, does a job, and aesthetically, it's really pleasing for our brand, but we need to know how we're going to deal with that at the end. Yeah. So there's always those stories to be told. It's not necessarily having the recycled content or environmentally friendly materials. It could be, where did it come from?
Yeah, that's interesting.
That's true. And I mean, I'm fascinated to understand how the process went when you started with a design concept as well. You know, how did you work with the designers? I mean, I'd like to think with a company like Lush, where, you know, the whole ethos of the business is built around sustainability. Do you find the designers are clued in, or would they be turning around to you guys and going, I'd like to do this, how do we do it? Or do they come up with an idea where you have to then correct them to go, well, actually, that's not possible, but here's another way of doing it? I mean, was it a very good collaborative process?
Yes, it was.
So big pause there, Garry.
It's always the same with
goddamn designers.
It's always the same with collaboration. You always feel as though you get everything in the last minute.
Yes.
So we would have, my team and I would work really well with the designers during the process. Yeah. But conceptually, at the beginning, we would, or the kind of head designers would probably be given an image. So say, for example, one of the stores, they were given an image of a staircase. And that was it. So you got the look, you got the colour, you got the feel from it, the textures and what have you. And then basically it's like, right, we wanted to create something. We want to create a stunning store that's visually appealing, but also can be kind of interactive as well. These are our thoughts. So these are the material. These are your top kind of list of materials. We would then take that and we would then search and try and find the most sustainable options, or local kind of materials, local trades, local businesses, and start developing from there. I mean, there was a lot of going backwards and forwards, especially within the flagship stores. There was a lot of going backwards and forwards, and it's always very, very tight. It's all very down to the wire. It's all, you're waiting for things to dry and you're trying to drill them on, put them into, on a wall or whatever. But it's the collaboration between kind of on the ground is always kind of ongoing for the entire project. So yeah, it can be challenging, but I don't think you're ever going to change that, because that's
part of the design and build process, no matter what you're doing, isn't it?
Yeah,
it always comes too late. There's always a few ideas that are crazy, and then you're always scratching the head. The problem is you're the last in that whole line, aren't you? And it's always difficult when you're the last, because you inherit everyone else's delays, and there's still an opening date for the store. So yeah, I know.
Absolutely, and we always tried very, very hard in not saying no.
Yeah.
Designers got an idea in their head, and it's their baby, if you like, and it was really kind of, we need to help you create that. So what could we do? Sometimes we couldn't, it was very, very few, but the majority of the times we did put it out of the bag. But, and it was really, really interesting. It was the most fascinating kind of time that I've spent gaining knowledge, skills, and what have you, about from the environmental and sustainability point of view within store design. I hadn't really taken much notice of it 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it becomes your day-to-day kind of life, and long may it continue. Hopefully I can find another opportunity that can use my skills.
Well, definitely, I hope so, and hopefully today sort of help people understand a little bit about the thinking and understanding, and how broad the impact is, but also your experience. Now, Zoom's telling me we've got 2 hours and 50 seconds, so I think we better sort of wrap it up there. But so thank you very much for that, Garry. I mean, whenever I chat with you, my mind expands, and I find, I know a little bit. I'm one of those dangerous people that knows a little bit about it, so it's always great to know that there's someone I can defer to for a little bit more understanding of the full impact of it. So that was brilliant. Thank you very much for your time on that, Garry. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you for having me, and nice to meet you, Toby. You take care.
Thank you, Garry. Lovely to meet you. Bye-bye.
Bye. You too. Bye-bye.
That was fascinating.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think with one of the most important things I think that Garry was saying is just how I don't think this is a choice anymore. It used to be a thing where, maybe 1 or 2 stores had it as a kind of spectacle. But I think that's similar to diversity, similar to many other things. It's like, this is the way we should be doing business. If you're opening a store, of course, it shouldn't have impact on the environment. There's a cost with everything. So I think people like Garry, he clearly has huge amounts of experience in the operational and the kind of actually knowing how to build a store. And the fact that he is so passionate about sustainable, it's so important. So it's good to see.
I agree. There is so much depth. I remember when he was giving that talk, he was talking about how they were working with a wood provider, and they ran sustainable forests, but he found they were culling squirrels in the forest, so they stopped working with them. And I love that. That real. It's not just about the material; it's about the process. It's about thinking and acting responsibility as well. And once you get into that mindset, you can almost see the process of them taking an idea and implementing it must be such a challenge, because you're almost running around. Wherever you turn, you're considering an implication, or you're considering what was going on before you started dealing with it, and afterwards as well. It's a brilliant one. Fantastic. Well, I really enjoyed that one. So thank you very much for that, Toby. And we're actually doing a proper end to one of our podcasts.
We're getting there.
Rather than getting cut off mid-sentence like we have done so far. So thank you very much for that. And we'll catch up again next time.
Yeah, take it easy. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Take care, Toby. Bye.